arguably Austin's second biggest rivalry in the company was with The Rock. I mean, The Rock was equal to, if not greater than Austin as far as star power goes. Think about how lucky WWE was to not only have one breakout megastar, but to have two at the same time. I swear we will never see that again. I don't even think we saw it in the 80s. I mean, we had some pretty big duos. We had Hogan and Savage. We had Hogan and Andre, and in the 90s we had Bret and Shawn, but those were not to the megastar level that Austin and Rock were, at least combined. I mean, Hogan was huge in the 80s, but he didn't have that counterpart. He was above everybody. Where Austin and Rock, Austin's winning all the world titles and main eventing all the WrestleManias, but The Rock is hosting Saturday Night Live and getting movie deals. I mean, these guys were huge. They were both equally as charismatic, equally as good in the ring, equally as great on the mic, and it was just a magical time. Now, they go way back to Rock coming into the company. The first time I can ever remember Austin and Rock having any sort of confrontation was the little dig that Austin took at Rock during the Slammy Awards in 1990, I think it was 97, and Rock had just debuted at the Survivor Series, and he won, I think it was New Sensation, or Rookie of the Year, basically like their version of the Rookie of the Year. But Austin was kind of a new sensation too. He had only been there about 2 years, and he was really starting to gain some traction, and he had a great match with Bret at the same show that The Rock debuted on, and Rock wound up winning the award, and Austin went up to the podium, and he said, I wonder how many times you called in and voted for yourself, because there's no way that I didn't win this award. So right there you could see that Austin and Rock, they were going to be vying for the same spot on the card. And Austin got over first. I mean, he was huge in 97, working with Bret at WrestleMania with the double turn and just setting the world on fire all throughout 97, unfortunately, until he got injured by Owen Hart, where The Rock, on the other hand, was being booed out of the building as a babyface. The fans didn't like him. He got injured, came back as a heel, and joined the Nation of Domination. But Rock was still, even as a heel, he was not nearly as over quite yet in 97 as Austin was. And Austin, of course, was, on a meteoric rise, and the two would have a run-in 97. That was the big DX pay-per-view that I referenced a few minutes ago, and that was for the Intercontinental title. Austin beat The Rock, and then it was the next night on Raw where he forfeited the title back to The Rock and wound up tossing it off a bridge like the following week, or maybe it was the same night. It was the whole Intercontinental title off the bridge thing. So Rock and Austin were in the beginning stages of what was going to be a huge rivalry. And in 1998, they were the last two in the Royal Rumble. Austin tossed Rock out last. And then I think it was the week before WrestleMania. I'm pretty sure it was the go-home Raw of WrestleMania 14. I think Austin and Rock worked a singles match. That might have been the main event, and I know Austin won that on his road to the title against Shawn Michaels. So the two of them, even in late 97, early 98, were starting to butt heads a little bit. And then, of course, it would start getting big near the end there when Rock would turn babyface in 1998, start getting a lot of fans behind him, and you started noticing like, wow, he's not quite as over as Austin as a babyface, but he's close. And then they swerved us at Survivor Series when Rock and Austin are both in the tournament. Rock turns heel, Vince screws over Mankind, Rock becomes the corporate champion, embraces with the McMahons, and you knew as a fan, at least I did, you knew right after Survivor Series when Rock turned heel, the very first thing I thought of was WrestleMania. It's going to be Austin. It's going to be Rock for the title. Now, Rock would wind up taking a little bit of a detour on his way to WrestleMania to face Austin and have another pretty big feud and rivalry that we're going to discuss here in a minute with Mick Foley. But then when the dust settled, he lost the title. He won it back, lost it, won it back. Winds up going into WrestleMania as champion to face Stone Cold Steve Austin, who lost the Royal Rumble to Vince, but then beat Vince in the cage match at Valentine's Day Massacre, and he's in the main event against The Rock. And of course he beats him, like I talked about earlier on with Vince. And even in defeat, I felt like that was a really big night for The Rock. I mean, The Rock had only been in the business for 2 years and 4 months, and he's main eventing WrestleMania as the WWE champion. That's incredible. They were collectively going to be numbers 1 and 1A in the company. You could tell because right after WrestleMania 15 that year, The Rock immediately turned babyface right after WrestleMania. I think he had the rematch with Austin first at Backlash, right? I think it was after that he wound up turning babyface. But he had to, because even as a heel, fans were already starting to cheer him. Fans were already starting to laugh at his promos. Fans were already starting to chant along with him. They wanted to cheer him. So after he was done with Austin, you knew he was going to go babyface. babyface, and he did. And now you got a super over Rock babyface and a super over Austin babyface, and this was almost too much. This was like sensory overload for fans. And Austin would wind up getting hurt in late 1999, of course, and had to take a year off for neck surgery, and that's when The Rock really exploded. And again, we're going to talk about what The Rock did in the year 2000 in my next rivalry that I'll be discussing in a minute. But Austin would then come back from neck surgery in late 2000, and he would wind up winning the Royal Rumble in 2001. Rock, of course, beat Kurt Angle for the title a couple of weeks later, and you've set up a big babyface match, a lot bigger than 2 years prior at WrestleMania 15. You had The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, main event, WrestleMania 17. Houston, we have a fucking problem, and a big one. I mean, this was huge. This match is, I don't want to say it's underrated because WrestleMania 17, a lot of fans consider that one of the best, if not the best WrestleMania of all time. Many people have that in their top three. So I don't want to say it's an underrated match, but as far as the marquee value of it goes, I do think it's underrated. Looking back on that now, we're never going to see a match like that. Even a few years ago at WrestleMania 28, the big dream match between John Cena and The Rock, that was still nothing. And that was a pretty big match. I mean, that was a really well done and well put together affair there between the two of them. At least that first match was. Can't really say that for WrestleMania 29, but 28 was pretty solid. But even as big of a spectacle as that was, it just does not even come close to the level of match this was between Steve Austin and The Rock. And of course, they did turn Austin heel that night. He basically had to cheat to beat The Rock, hammering him into the mat with a chair like a railroad spike, winning the title, shaking hands with Vince McMahon, shocking his hometown audience or his home state audience there in Houston. And a lot of people look back at that as a mistake, but you know, it may have been, it may not have been, but all I know is that was a pretty damn big, iconic match, and I liked it a lot more than the WrestleMania 15 match. A lot more. And the level of star that they both were was even greater than it was 2 years prior to that, which is why they found themselves in a stadium show for the first time in many years. WrestleMania 17 was the first stadium show in a long time at WrestleMania. That just goes to show you how huge those guys were. That was an amazing match, an amazing night. And by this point, you know, Hollywood had started to come calling on The Rock. He left to go do a movie. He did The Mummy. And from there, it was no looking back for The Rock. Now, he would stick around in 2001, very heavily involved in the invasion angle, as was Austin. They basically headed up the two respective factions. You know, The Rock was the top WWE guy. Austin was the top Alliance guy. The Rock would find himself feuding with Booker T and Chris Jericho in 2001. Austin would be feuding with Kurt Angle mostly in 2001. And then, of course, they would be captaining their respective Survivor Series teams, and they were the last two in the ring until The Rock beat Austin and ended the alliance. So another big chapter in Rock versus Austin, as they were basically the two main figures during the invasion angle, which is such a shame when you look back on it because of all the ways WWE royally fucked up that invasion angle. I think one of the worst parts about it is that we didn't get Austin and Rock on the same team. It's too bad that they could not get some bigger names from WCW. The Goldbergs, the Nashes, the Flairs, the Hogans, the Randy Savages, guys like that. If you would have had the meat and potatoes of WCW, you know, with Sting leading the charge up against guys like Austin and Rock, oh my God, that would have been fun shit. But unfortunately, they had to be on opposing sides there. And that would pretty much be the end of the two of them until Rock wound up turning heel and Austin returned to the company, and they faced each other at WrestleMania 19 in Austin's farewell match. Austin, of course, walked out on the company in 2002, and Rock really wouldn't be around much either because he was off doing movies and he was kind of in and out. So right around 2002 there, right after WrestleMania 18, you know, when Rock had that big match with Hogan, that was almost the end of it. I know Rock came back in the summer of 2002. He dropped the belt to Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam, but for the most part, he was not around. So just like that, within a snap of your fingers, Austin and Rock are out of the WWE. And then they changed names from WWF to WWE. That just made everything harder. I just remember being a pretty depressed wrestling fan at that time. I felt things were changing. It didn't feel like it was the WWE that I had been loving so much for the previous 4 years. And that's when I started noticing a significant just difference in the business. And Rock and Austin leaving right around the same time was a big part of that. And Austin would finally mend fences with WWE and come back in 2003. He would work WrestleMania with The Rock and not tell anybody that it was his retirement match. And Austin went in that night pretty much knowing that was going to be it for him, and he paid The Rock back. For the 2 previous WrestleMania jobs that The Rock did for him, Austin laid down for The Rock in a really fun match. One of my more favorite Austin and Rock matches, to be honest, which is a shame. I still felt like Austin could have wrestled 5 more years, but he had to hang him up, and he probably did the right thing for his health and his neck and all of that. But I don't really look back at the match as a bad match. I thought it was a really good match. I thought it was an entertaining match. And it was such a perfect way for Austin to go out. There's really no other person that I would have rather seen him work with after their long history. And after, when you look at the rivalry between Austin and Rock, Austin did, I think, overall win the rivalry. He won the bigger matches. He won the bigger moments. He has 2 WrestleMania victories over The Rock. He beat him in Intercontinental title matches. He tossed him over the top rope at the Royal Rumble, where all The Rock really did to Austin in return was beat him at Survivor Series 2001, and then, of course, beating him in his final match at WrestleMania 19. But still, overall, you look back at Austin and Rock. If it weren't for Austin and McMahon, I might put Austin and Rock right at the top of the Attitude Era rivalries just because of how huge of stars they were. And it was amazing. And there was no bad blood. I mean, they had a little bit of animosity earlier on in their career. There have been some stories that Austin didn't really like Rock, but as they worked together over the years, they grew to respect each other. They grew to love each other, and they're friends to this day. It's a happy ending for once in wrestling. And I'm proud of Rock and what he's accomplished. And I'm proud of Austin's career. I'm proud of both of them.